Hey everyone, welcome back to our next session. Really great to be picking up where we left off earlier. So we're going straight into our session on microlearning. So lots to take away. Please do get involved in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from, what you're looking to get out of the session, and then as we move forwards, make sure you're getting your questions in ahead of the Q&A at the end of the session. But with all that said, I think that's quite enough from me. So I'm going to shut up, get out of the way, and hand over the stage. Amelia, it's over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you everybody for joining today. Hello, I'm Amelia Mahlstadt, and my background is in education, curriculum and instruction, and instructional design, and I'm really excited to be here today to explore the topic of microlearning. So being in the field of L&D, we have to navigate the evolving landscape of learning, and microlearning is a powerful strategy that we can use to increase learner engagement and retention. And like Tom said, would love for you all to be involved in the chat, but I also do have some anonymous polls and quizzes throughout. So I'd love for you to be able to take out your phone and scan the code and get involved as much as possible. And so with that, we are going to start with a poll, and this is to gauge your prior knowledge and experiences going into the session. So how much experience do you have with microlearning? So if you would, go ahead and scan that code. Again, it is anonymous. And let's take a look at our experiences that we have as a collective group. Okay, so it looks like pretty even with having experiences taking training. Oh, it's moving a little bit. So a little more of us have actually designed training in the microlearning format. Okay, interesting. Okay, pretty even. So some experience overall, but maybe throughout this presentation, you will gain some experience in designing that training in the microlearning format. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. So in today's session, we're going to explore how microlearning enhances learner engagement and retention through short, focused modules. And my hope for this session is that you will leave with gained confidence to design microlearning using these various strategies we're going to talk about today. So for our agenda, we'll delve into what microlearning is. We'll explore its effects on learning retention, and then I'll talk through a real-world case study that highlights the effect of microlearning strategies that can promote that engagement and retention. So again, let's play Two Truths and a Lie. If you would take out your phones and again scan the code. You'll see three statements presented, and I'll ask you to put a check mark next to the two true statements and an X next to the false statement. So we're looking at microlearning usually covers 1 to 2 learning objectives. Is that true or false? Microlearning condenses content into shorter learning. Is that true or false? And then microlearning typically addresses one topic. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's take a look at the correct answers. So the first statement, microlearning usually covers 1 to 2 learning objectives. That is true. And the last statement, microlearning typically addresses one topic. That's true as well. And then that middle statement, microlearning condenses content into shorter learning. That is the false statement. And I know it's kind of a tricky one, the way that it's worded. But really, when you think about microlearning, it's not about condensing. It's more about chunking the content. So keep these things in mind as we go forward with the session. Again, thank you for participating in that. So let's begin with a quick overview. Microlearning, as the name suggests, involves delivering information in small, easily digestible portions. So this is significant because our learners are facing attention span challenges in our really fast-paced, digitally driven era. And traditional lengthy formats often struggle to capture and sustain our focus, and so microlearning steps in as a solution. And it can address these challenges head on. And so hopefully it's not a trend. Hopefully it can be a shift in the way that we approach learning. And so to explain further, studies have found that learners learn best and are most likely to recall learning when they can process information through those small, manageable chunks instead of through a longer and more concentrated time frame. And microlearning is a short learning event focused on just the essential content. And it could be e-learning, but it could also be a job aid. It could be an article, a video. It could even be in-person or VILT training. It could even be during a team weekly huddle where somebody presents a quick focused topic. And again, we are focused on that essential content with just 1 to 2 learning objectives. And again, it's not about condensing, it's more about chunking that content. So the most asked question I see when it comes to microlearning is, how long should a microlearning event or course be? And so according to the Association for Talent Development, it is useful to know the length of microlearning and what's considered most ideal or effective, but many experts argue that microlearning should not be tied to a particular length of time, although most agree that 10 minutes or less is ideal, with videos being 6 minutes or less. But instead of focusing too much on a number of minutes, I ask you to consider it should be as long as it needs to be. So no longer, no shorter. And again, microlearning should focus on that essential content that is need to know versus that nice to know content. So as you develop content, it's important to ask yourself, is this important or is it just interesting? And each microlearning segment should cover 1 to 2 learning objectives, but again, it's not based on an arbitrary time limit. And when we're planning microlearning, we can also think about the type of learning, and it can typically be categorized into 4 types of learning. So the first might be pre-work, and this would be anything to prepare people for a longer length of learning that comes down the road. And this could potentially be up to 10 minutes. At times, we also want to boost learning or reinforce learning that's already taken place, and this could be 30 seconds to 5 minutes. And then for new learning that might be in a standalone module, this single module could be 4 to 8 minutes. And then at times, we'll need to have learning around performance support. It depends on the use case. It could be a job aid, and at a glance, a just-in-time learning. But this could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. So when we think about the length of microlearning, we want to stay within that range of 30 seconds to 10 minutes. But again, it depends on the type of learning. You want to make it fit to the function and what you're trying to accomplish. So as you design your learning content, while you're considering the types of microlearning that were just described, here's some helpful questions that you can ask yourself to help determine the length. So you could consider, how are you using the microlearning? What are you trying to accomplish? And what works best for the learner and meets their needs? And then you can determine the length based on those considerations along with the type of learning that's being presented. So learner retention is a big challenge when delivering learning, and microlearning strategies are one great way to address this challenge. So we're going to play Guess the Number. Some studies suggest that we forget approximately what percentage of new information within just an hour of learning it. So if you don't mind scanning in, I'd love to see what percentage we think. Okay, so it looks like we've got ranges around the 50th percentile and going up from there. Give you another second to, I see 80% in the chat. Okay, let's see. So 50%. So 50% of new learning is forgotten within 1 hour of learning it. And that's just within the first hour. So those of you that are saying even higher than 50%, as time goes on, that percentage will go up as well. So thank you for participating in that. So let's talk a little bit about some factors that affect our retention in hopes that we can up that retention and lower that percentage. So one is dual coding. This is the process of providing learners with both visual and verbal materials at the same time. And research suggests that the mind processes information along two channels, both verbal and nonverbal. In a study that was done at the University of Iowa, learners retained 68% more information when presented with information through both visual and auditory channels. So cognitive load refers to the amount of information that our working memory can process at any given time. So by being mindful of cognitive load, we can avoid overloading learners with more than they can process into their schemas for long-term memory storage and future recall. And that's where chunking that content really comes into play. And then last is reflection. When we as learners engage in reflective thinking, we're better able to analyze and evaluate our experiences, which enable us to extract meaning and actively process what we've learned and make sense of it. So by taking time to engage in the process and the practice of thinking and reflecting on our learning, we can make more meaningful connections and gain a deeper understanding of the material, which leads to greater long-term retention and being able to apply that knowledge. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve illustrates how learners forget information over time if not reinforced. So that's the key. We want to reinforce that learning. And microlearning aligns perfectly with combating this curve. Research consistently shows that shorter spaced intervals of learning lead to better information retention. So we are going to watch a microlearning video that I created using Synthesia, an AI rapid video development software, to learn a bit more about Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve. And then we'll practice some of the strategies that we just learned up to this point.
Welcome. I'm Colette. Today, we're going to delve into a fascinating concept that impacts how we design learning experiences: the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Understanding this phenomenon is crucial for creating instructional materials that lead to long-term retention and meaning. Hermann Ebbinghaus in the late 19th mathematical formula that illustrates the rate at which information is forgotten over time, if not reinforced. Imagine you've just learned something new. Initially, you retain a significant portion of that information.
However, over time, without reinforcement, your ability to recall that information declines rapidly, following a predictable curve.
The curve demonstrates that without proper reinforcement, much of the material is forgotten within a relatively short period. Some studies suggest that we forget approximately 50% of new information within an hour of learning it. That number goes up to about 70% within 24 hours. With each repetition of the learning material, retention is increased. The rate at which a person forgets depends on several factors, including memory strength, how complex the material is, and physiological factors such as stress. The good news is that there are a number of methods you can use to help your learners challenge the forgetting curve. Spaced learning can be achieved by spacing out learning sessions over time, rather than trying to fit all the content into one session. Retrieval practice incorporates activities that require learners to actively retrieve information from memory. Quizzes, social learning features, and reflective exercises are effective tools to promote retrieval practice. Keep it engaging. Having engaging courses will not only improve completion rates, but it also helps learners retain information, making information easier to digest. For example, learner concentration naturally wanes if they're reading mountains of text, reducing knowledge retention. Mix things up and keep your learners' interest by varying the content you're using. Have your learners actively participate in the course rather than being passive observers. Make the learning relevant. The human brain is selective and has a limited capacity. When planning training, make it as relevant to the learner as possible. The more relevant and meaningful the training, the easier it will be for them to absorb and remember the information they need. Ebbinghouse's research dates back to the 1880s, but it is still widely used and highly regarded. In 2015, a research team successfully reproduced his findings and concluded that his methods and theories still held true. To review, the forgetting curve illustrates the importance of designing learning experiences that prioritize long-term retention. By leveraging strategies such as spaced learning, retrieval practice, and making the learning engaging and relevant, we can create materials that promote knowledge retention. Thanks for watching.
All right. Thank you for watching that. And so now we're going to practice the strategy of reflecting. And so I'm curious to know what your video takeaways are. What was one idea that was new or possibly interesting to you? So if you would scan in the code, again, it's anonymous. Let's take a look. Something new or interesting. I'm not alone in forgetting stuff. It does seem like I have to write everything down in order to remember it. All right, thank you. I appreciate your responses there. All right, so we're going to look at a case study on Duolingo. In the chat, if you've ever used Duolingo, give me a yes or a thumbs up. And to be clear, I have no affiliation with Duolingo, but I present this case study to show how they're using microlearning best practices for learner success. And so for a little bit of background, if you're unfamiliar, Duolingo is a popular language learning platform that offers courses in various languages to millions of users worldwide. And with the goal of helping users achieve fluency in a new language, Duolingo faced challenges of ensuring that learners really retained their language skills over the long term. So to address this challenge, Duolingo implemented several strategies informed by principles of the forgetting curve and best practices in microlearning. So the first is that spaced repetition. Duolingo integrated spaced repetition algorithms into its learning platform. So rather than presenting all vocabulary and grammar concepts at once, their algorithms spaced out the review of previously learned material at optimal intervals. And this was based on each learner's progress and retention. And we might not have, the technology with the platforms in particular that we're using to, use algorithms to space out the review, but we can still use that concept of spaced repetition to really ensure that our learners revisit and reinforce that previously learned material over time. The next idea is interleaved practice. And in microlearning, this involves providing a wide range of activities where we challenge learners to apply knowledge from different contexts throughout their learning journey. So Duolingo introduced interleaved practice through a range of exercises and activities, and rather than focusing solely on one aspect of language learning, such as like vocabulary or grammar, Duolingo's exercises are designed to include a mix of skills. So that requires learners to continually retrieve and apply knowledge from different contexts. So when we're designing learning experiences, we can create assessments, scenarios, or even exercises that require learners to apply knowledge from different modules or lessons. And what this does is it makes the learning more challenging, and it puts learners into a mode of productive struggle where the process of learning goes beyond passive learning and into active learning. So next is social learning. Learning is social, and Duolingo offers social learning features that allow users to interact with their peers, compete with friends, participate in community challenges, and users can add friends, they can follow each other's progress, and even view leaderboards to see how they stack up against others. They also host community challenges, they have discussion forums, and these communities provide platforms for learners to ask questions, share tips, and engage in peer-to-peer learning and support. So, by integrating social learning elements and interactions, we can foster that sense of community and collaboration, which will enrich the learning experience and also makes it for more motivating learning. Next, we have gamification. Duolingo incorporates gamification elements, including points, levels, streaks, and even virtual rewards to motivate learners and make learning more enjoyable. And so by achieving milestones and earning rewards, learners get that immediate feedback and positive reinforcement, which encourage them to continue their learning journey. So when we design learning, we can incorporate game-like elements, including points and badges and leaderboards, and this can increase learner engagement and motivation, making the learning enjoyable as well. There's also retrieval practice or even micro-assessments. Duolingo incorporates retrieval practice through regular quizzes, challenges, and interactive exercises. And these activities prompt learners to actively recall and apply concepts that they learned in previous lessons. And that reinforces that memory retrieval and deepens their understanding. So by offering low stakes assessments as a micro review, learners can gauge their understanding and self-reflect to identify areas for improvement. And they can reinforce their learning, and this also promotes active engagement and knowledge retention. And all of these learning strategies are implemented on a mobile app for access to learning anywhere you are. So as L&D professionals, we can recognize the potential of microlearning strategies in enhancing outcomes. And so by integrating even just some of these principles, we can empower learners to effectively and efficiently acquire and retain the skills that they're learning. And so with that, I'll leave you with my favorite quote around learning. Knowledge is not simply passed on. Knowledge is socially and culturally constructed in doing and experiencing. And so I would love to reflect on our learning for this session through a word cloud. In 1 or 2 words, what would you like to remember or take with you moving forward? So again, if you don't mind scanning the code. You can also add emojis. All right, spaced practice, chunking, interleaving, love that. Take time for repetition. And chunking just grew a little bit as well, showing that that's a big idea. All right, thank you all for participating in that. And I just want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope that you feel more confident to design microlearning experiences for your learners, or maybe even advocate for that as needed. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I would love your feedback on my presentation. You know, as L&D professionals, we are also lifelong learners. So I have a 1-minute course survey. If you don't mind giving feedback on the presentation, I would love to learn from you as well. So thank you again for joining, and I also appreciate all of the conversation in the chat as well.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for that. I think that was really fascinating. Everyone seemed to get a lot out of it. Everyone very active in the chat. So thank you, audience, for doing that. If there are any questions, it's a great way to get in touch over on LinkedIn there as well. And I can already see there's a lot of conversations that maybe want further discussion, like is learning the same as training? Which used to be a really big topic of debate and kind of has just disappeared over the last 4 or 5 years. I can't possibly guess why, but I guess we've all been a bit busy. But it would be nice to discuss that again, I think. So our next session is in 15 minutes, and we're talking pens, interactive carpets, and holograms. So a little bit different to what we've had, but hopefully just as valuable. Amelia, thank you so much for this session, and we will see you all at the next one.
Thank you so much.
iSpring is an e-learning software provider dedicated to streamlining e-learning worldwide. With a team of top industry specialists, they create tools that make e-learning both efficient and enjoyable. Their AI-powered course creation tool, iSpring Suite, and the iSpring Learn LMS are the top choices for thousands of instructional designers, L&D pros, and content developers. Crafted with the user workflow in mind, iSpring ensures a seamless experience for the creation of impactful learning content. Their website, iSpringSolutions.com, offers a treasure trove of e-learning resources perfect for those seeking to boost their L&D career or elevate their organization's e-learning practices. You can check out the iSpring Solutions website using the link in the description below.